Hey, welcome to week 2. This week we're gonna we're gonna learn about acoustic resonance. I know that term might not be super familiar to you, but it will be by the end of this week. Briefly, what we're going to be looking at is basic resonance and how to apply that to speech. The concept of resonance is a really important concept to learn what's going on in speech production. If you took my anatomy class, and likely if you've had any of the other instructors' anatomy class as well, they stress to you that resonance is really what creates the difference in sound between an E, an I, an A, an all those different vowels, and most of our consonants as well, our voiced consonants anyway. The reason for that is we can produce one pitch in the vocal folds. We have a buzz that we can produce, and we can change the pitch of that buzz, but that's just one fundamental frequency that we're making. And we have harmonics of that frequency, but if we just were left with, if we had no resonators and articulators, we would just be making different pitches of buzz. And that would be a very different way to communicate than what we do. So instead, we have resonators, resonant cavities, the pharynx, the nasal cavities, and the mouth, and different shapes that we make in those cavities with all the different muscles that you learned in anatomy. Set up different resonant frequencies. And those different resonant frequencies change the sound that we actually hear. They set up what's called formants. We're going to talk about that more later in this class, but essentially they set up formants. And that creates the difference between all of our vowels and some of our consonants. This week, we're going to be talking about the source filter model, which again, if you had anatomy with me, and if you had 205 with me, if you had anatomy with me, but not 367, I don't talk about it in there. Either of the other two, you should know the source filter model. But we're going to talk about it again. It's it's the model of speech production. And then we're going to add something new. We're going to add perturbation theory into the source filter model to help get us closer to how we actually create speech sounds. So this is what you're going to look at in the modules. Remember that after each portion of the module, after each one of these 6 portions of the modules, there is a very short quiz. You can take it as many times as you like. You have as long as you want. You have to get 3 correct, but it would behoove you to get 5 because these are the same questions that you'll see in quizzes and exams. Speaking of exams, the end of this week is going to be your first exam, and the questions in the exam are actually pulled from the bank of questions that you see at the end of these knowledge checks. So if you're doing well in the knowledge checks, you're going to do pretty well on the exam. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or the TA, and we're both on Slack as well. My hours are Thursdays from 10 to 11, and off the top of my head, I actually don't remember when TA office hours are, but they're on Canvas for you to take a look at. But email, Slack, that's, I guess, the only way to get in contact with us. But if you have any questions, please do. We're happy to help, and we want you to do well. I mean, if everybody got an A, we feel like we're doing our job. So the more of you that are doing well, the better we feel. All right. So before you move on to the first portion of this module, I want to talk about resonance. Let's just define what resonance is. So a wave has a wavelength. We know that from the last module, right? Every wave has a length that it takes for that wave to go through one cycle. It's different for different waves. it's inversely related to the frequency, right? So a high frequency wave has a very short wavelength. A low frequency wave has a very long wavelength. But every wave has a wavelength. What's really interesting is if that wavelength matches the length of an object, the object will vibrate sympathetically. So if you, like me, have a guitar, one thing that I want you to try out, and it has to actually be an electric guitar. What I want you to try is plug your guitar or bass or electric violin or electric cello or whatever you have that's a string instrument, plug it into your amp and sit in front of your computer. After you sit in front of your computer for a while, and don't touch the strings, just let them hang out like they are, a feedback loop is going to begin. You'll start to hear a hum, kind of a low frequency hum, come out of your amp. And you think maybe it's the amp giving you some sort of feedback, but actually it is, if you look at your strings, you'll notice that one of them is vibrating. And what's going on there is, like we talked about before, like 60 hertz electrical vibrations in the air, just from all of the electrical equipment. And there could be other frequencies as well from other things that you've got running. Those get picked up by the string. So one of your strings will vibrate sympathetically with those waves. It'll be picked up by the pickups, it'll be transferred to the amp, and the amp will send out very low tone that then matches whatever frequency your string is vibrating with. Well, the string then gets that tone from the amp, and its vibration gets stronger. It comes back through the amp. Now the frequency that comes out of the amp is a little bit stronger, has more amplitude. That's picked up by the string. So it vibrates more, back to the amp, it's louder, the string vibrates more, the amp gets louder, and eventually you can actually see the string vibrating, and you can hear the sound coming out of your amp. And this is resonance. But it works with other things. It doesn't work with it works with musical instruments, but it doesn't work with only musical instruments. But before I show you other things it works with, let's talk about other types of musical instruments. So a noisy tone. Now, I don't know if there's any brass players in the class, you'll know this. And if you don't, this is going to sound kind of goofy to you. But when you play a trumpet, if you just had the mouthpiece off, it just kind of sounds like a duck quack. So you kind of do like a... like that kind of a noise. And that's not perfect, because I don't actually I'm just using my hand as a mouthpiece, but it's close to that. Now, what that does is it sends out a lot of different frequencies. It's a noisy tone, a dissonant tone, so there's a lot of different frequencies in there. And as you open different valves in the trumpet by pushing on different keys, different lengths of tube in there are allowed to be activated by the wave traveling through the air in the tubes. So one of the tones that comes from that matches that wavelength. It has the same wavelength as that tube that you've opened up. And so then that frequency gets accentuated and the others get dampened. So what you hear, like a wah, like that kind of a sound, comes from that same noisy tone that you're giving it into the mouthpiece. And the reason why you get a much cleaner tone than you get out of the mouthpiece is because the frequencies that don't match up with the length of that tube are dampened, and the frequencies that do match up are accentuated. And this is true for instruments that use reeds as well, like an oboe. But, like I said, it's not just musical instruments. So let's take a look at this. This is an old episode of Mythbusters, but it had a guy that can break wine glasses with his voice. So what's going on there is he's able to sing, I guess, or shriek or whatever at the correct frequency to make that glass vibrate with his tone that he's creating. So the air column inside the glass is going to vibrate perfectly. He's matching the wavelength, his wavelength that's coming out of his mouth. The tone that he's producing matches the shape of the air column inside the glass. And so then what happens there is that air column starts vibrating more and more intensely with his tone that he's producing until the glass just can't handle it. You can also see this in the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. This is in your textbook as well. And, you know, really, this isn't exactly resonance. It's close. It's a type of resonance. I mean, if you asked a physicist, they would say, well, it's actually this aerodynamic thing we have to worry about with airplanes a lot. And that's true, but it is related to resonance. So what's going on with this is the speed of the wind blowing over this bridge is setting up a frequency. It's blowing in such a way that it sets up a resonant frequency that is the same as the length of this bridge. And that causes this motion to accentuate further and further until there's one car left, until it just completely collapses. Let's see if we can... Oh, okay. So we're actually going to watch the bridge completely break now, I think. Oh. Look at that motion. That's ridiculous. And this isn't an earthquake. This isn't, you know, any sort of natural disaster. This is just wind blowing down the Narrows from the Sound through this bridge. If you're from the Seattle area, you probably have seen this all your life. Let's get to the, catastrophic failure here. Oh, there we go. Total collapse. Just realized I'm not on full screen. Sorry about that. Watch that again. That poor car. Whoa! Ridiculous, right? This is just caused by wind, by resonance of the bridge. Crazy. So that's how powerful resonance is, and we can talk about it in a third way as well.
Are affected by earthquake-induced seismic waves. All buildings have a natural period, or resonance, which is a number of seconds it takes for the building to naturally vibrate back and forth. The ground also has a specific resonant frequency. Hard bedrock has higher frequencies than softer sediments. If the period of ground motion matches the natural resonance of the building, it will undergo the largest oscillations possible and suffer the greatest damage. Small buildings of 1 or 2 stories resonate naturally at much less than 1 second periods. As 1 second period will affect buildings of about 10 stories. For example, a 30-story building resonates at a period of 3 seconds, and a 50-story building resonates at a period of 5 seconds. During the 1985 Mexico City earthquake, the ground beneath the city resonated with a 2-second period for over a minute. Thus, medium-height buildings with similar natural periods suffered the most damage, while short, old, weak stone buildings and skyscrapers were relatively undamaged.
Now, there's one thing that the voiceover guy is not saying here that I think is really, really, really interesting. So you can see over here, they've actually got bedrock seismogram over here as well. This is a different kind of substrate, right? So this is the sandy one. This is going to oscillate with low frequency. And over here, this is just rock. This is going to oscillate with a high frequency. So you'd expect houses like most of us live in, just our typical 1 to 2 story things, to be destroyed over here. And these large buildings were relatively untouched because of this fast oscillation. Over here, we end up with oscillation that is the same because this has so over here, you've got a much longer period, and that allows for this building to sway back and forth at the same time that the ground is swaying back and forth. So the ground movement causes the building to sway, and they're swaying in the same time frame. And so then as the building is going to go, let's say forwards, and then it's going to come back, and at the same time the building is rebounding from the initial movement, the ground is moving back. And then when it starts to go forward, the ground is moving forward at the same time. So the motion of the building gradually grows to greater extent because the ground is moving at the same rate that the building is. And so then you end up with a total collapse, like the bridge video said, of the building. In the hills over here, you've got these little slow these fast oscillations, and so the building like this, about adding waves together from the last module. Well, it's got a very slow period, and we're going to have a back and forth motion of the ground multiple times in one oscillation of this building. So there will be times when the motion is accentuated, but there's going to be times when the motions cancel each other out too. So the ground might be moving backwards at the same time the building is moving forwards, and that cancels out some of the motion. And then the building doesn't undergo as much stress. So resonance is a really interesting, I can't get this to go away. Resonance is a really interesting concept. It's really interesting in terms of physics. It's really interesting in terms of sound. And again, like I mentioned, it's the thing that gives us the difference between an E and an It creates the difference between a trumpet and a tuba and a piano, etc., playing the same note. That each one is going to have different resonant frequencies. And even though they might all be playing the same note, the harmonics are going to come out differently because of the resonance. And that's what creates all the different timbres and sounds that we associate with speech sounds and musical instruments. All right, go ahead and get started on your the portions of these modules. And like I said, email me or the TA with any questions you have. All right, good luck.